Caligula. Caligula became Rome's third emperor in 37 AD at age 24 and started out reasonably well, but a severe illness later that year seemed to break his mind completely. He declared himself a living god, demanding worship and building temples in his own honor while rapidly burning through Rome's enormous treasury surplus, which ancient sources later estimated at 2.7 billion sesterces. Doing all of this in his first year alone. The young emperor allegedly made his horse Incitatus a consul, or at least threatened to, while executing senators and nobles on whims for his own entertainment. He reportedly slept with his sisters and murdered people for pleasure, turning the palace into a house of horrors. His 3-year reign ended when the Praetorian Guard finally assassinated him in 41 AD, but the damage to Rome's stability had already been done. Nero. Nero ruled as Rome's 5th emperor from 54 to 68 AD, and became infamous for allegedly starting the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, which burned 10 of the city's 14 districts. Whether he started it or not, he definitely blamed Christians for the disaster and used the cleared land to build his massive Domus Aurea, a 300-acre palace with a rotating dining room that consumed vast treasury funds. This emperor murdered his own mother Agrippina by sinking her ship and then stabbing her when she survived, killed both his wives Octavia and Poppaea, and executed countless senators to seize their wealth for funding his artistic obsessions. The myth about him fiddling while Rome burned isn't true, but the reality was arguably worse. Multiple revolts finally forced him to commit suicide in 68 AD, ending the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Commodus ended the era of the 5 good emperors when he took power in 180 AD as the son of the great Marcus Aurelius, and things went downhill immediately. Ancient sources claim he fought as a gladiator in the Colosseum over 700 times, charging Rome 1 million sesterces per appearance, while killing ostriches, lions, elephants, and reportedly 100 bears in a single day, though such numbers may be exaggerated. The delusional emperor renamed Rome itself to Colonia Lucia Annia Commodiana, and even renamed all 12 months of the year after his various titles. His paranoid purges killed senators and confiscated their estates to fund his gladiatorial games, draining Rome's resources for entertainment. After 12 years of this madness, his wrestling partner Narcissus strangled him to death in 192 AD when poison failed to work, but the emperor's misrule had already destabilized the empire. Pertinax wasn't evil himself, but his murder after just 87 days as emperor in 193 AD triggered the catastrophic year of 5 emperors crisis. The elderly senator tried to restore Senate power and cut the Praetorian Guard's excessive pay and privileges, which the soldiers definitely didn't appreciate. On March 28, 193 AD, the guards broke into his palace and speared him to death, then paraded his severed head through Rome on a lance. His assassination proved that the military now held more power than either the emperor or the Senate, completely undermining imperial authority. What happened next was even worse, as the Praetorian Guard decided to literally auction off the Roman Empire to the highest bidder, showing just how far Rome had fallen from its republican ideals. Didius Julianus. Didius Julianus became emperor by purchasing the throne at an auction held by the Praetorian Guard, paying 25,000 sesterces per soldier for a total likely exceeding 200 million sesterces. He outbid his own father-in-law Sulpicianus by 5,000 sesterces per man, and thought this would secure his power, but he was catastrophically wrong. With no military support beyond bought loyalty and zero Senate legitimacy, multiple generals across the empire declared themselves emperor and marched their legions toward Rome. The terrified Julianus tried to pay off Septimius Severus to go away, but the Senate instead declared him an enemy of state and condemned him to death. After ruling for only 66 days, one of the shortest reigns in Roman history, he was beheaded in his own palace on June 1st, 193 AD. Septimius Severus. Septimius Severus won the brutal civil war that followed Pertinax's death and founded the Severan dynasty, ruling from 193 to 211 AD by military might alone. He killed Didius Julianus, defeated his rival emperors, then purged the Senate by executing hundreds of members and replacing them with military loyalists who would never challenge him. The new emperor significantly increased the soldiers' pay from roughly 300 to about 400 denarii annually, creating a financial crisis that would plague future emperors for generations. On his deathbed in York, Britain in 211 AD, Severus gave his sons advice that summarized his philosophy perfectly: enrich the soldiers and ignore everyone else. He had transformed Rome into a military dictatorship, where civilian governance meant nothing, permanently weakening the empire's traditional power structures and setting the stage for the chaos to come. Caracalla. Caracalla murdered his younger brother Geta in their mother's arms in December 211 AD, then proceeded to kill between 20,000 and 30,000 of Geta's supporters in a massive purge. He co-ruled with his father Septimius Severus before this fratricide, but once he had sole power, his reign became defined by violence and financial ruin. His famous Edict of 212 extended Roman citizenship to all free men in the empire, which sounds progressive until you realize he did it primarily to increase the number of people he could tax. While bankrupting the treasury, he still found resources to build the massive baths of Caracalla, which could hold 1,600 bathers simultaneously. The emperor dramatically raised taxes and debased the currency to fund his military campaigns before being assassinated in April 217 AD by his own praetorian prefect while urinating on the roadside, Elagabalus. Elagabalus became emperor at age 14 in 218 AD as a Syrian priest, and immediately tried to replace Jupiter with the Syrian sun god Elagabal as Rome's chief deity, which horrified traditional Romans. The teenage emperor married and divorced 5 times in 4 years, including a Vestal virgin named Aquilia Severa, which was a death penalty offense that he somehow got away with. Ancient sources claim he prostituted himself in the palace and cross-dressed publicly, though these accounts come from hostile historians and should be taken with skepticism. What's certain is that he bankrupted the treasury with extravagant parties, allegedly suffocating dinner guests by dropping massive amounts of rose petals from the ceiling and releasing snakes at banquets. At age 18 in 222 AD, he and his mother were murdered, their bodies dragged through the streets and thrown into the Tiber River. Maximinus Thrax. Maximinus Thrax became the first barracks emperor in 235 AD, a man of purely military background with no senatorial connections, who never even visited Rome during his 3-year reign. Ancient sources claim he stood over 8 feet tall with a thumb twice normal size and could drink 7 gallons of wine daily, though these measurements are almost certainly exaggerated propaganda. What's not exaggerated is how he dramatically raised taxes across the empire to fund his military campaigns, brutally confiscating estates from anyone who couldn't pay. The emperor governed entirely from military camps on the frontier, showing complete contempt for Rome's civilian institutions and the Senate. When the Senate finally declared him and his son enemies of the state, his own soldiers murdered both of them outside Aquileia in 238 AD, ending his brutal reign. Gordian I. Gordian I was an 80-year-old senator of enormous wealth and status who definitely did not want to be emperor, but a rioting mob in Africa proclaimed him anyway in 238 AD. The elderly politician agreed to co-rule with his 46-year-old son Gordian II to legitimize the claim, and the Senate in Rome immediately recognized them both because they desperately wanted to oppose Maximinus Thrax. The joint reign lasted exactly 22 days before disaster struck. On April 12, 238 AD, Gordian II was killed in battle against Gallienus, the governor of Numidia who remained loyal to Maximinus. When news reached Gordian I that same day that his son had died, the grief-stricken 80-year-old emperor hanged himself with his belt, ending their brief and tragic dynasty before it even really began. Gordian II co-ruled with his 80-year-old father for those same 22 days in 238 AD before everything fell apart catastrophically. At age 46, he led the army against Gallienus, the governor of Numidia who commanded forces loyal to Maximinus Thrax. Despite having numerical advantage, Gordian II lost the battle near Carthage on April 12, 238 AD, and was killed in the fighting. His death triggered his father's immediate suicide just hours later, collapsing their entire claim to the throne. The younger Gordian's battlefield defeat showed that having senatorial legitimacy and popular support meant nothing without military competence and loyal troops. This father-son disaster proved once again that the Roman Empire had become a military state, where actual fighting ability mattered far more than political credentials or family connections. Decius ruled from 249 to 251 AD and became the first emperor to order empire-wide persecution of Christians, issuing an edict in 250 AD requiring all citizens to sacrifice to Roman gods or face execution. His officials created persecution certificates called libelli that citizens had to obtain by making the required sacrifices, and thousands of Christians were executed, imprisoned, or tortured for refusing to comply. More than 40 Christian leaders were killed during his systematic campaign, while he simultaneously fought Gothic invasions along the Danube frontier. On June 251 AD, Decius became the first Roman emperor killed in battle against barbarians when the Goths defeated his army at Abritus. He and his son Herennius Etruscus died with him in the swampy battlefield, and his body was never recovered, a humiliating end that showed Rome's growing military weakness against barbarian threats. Valerian Valerian continued the Christian persecution even more harshly than Decius during his reign from 253 to 260 AD, but his fate became the most humiliating in Roman history. In 260 AD, the emperor was captured alive by Persian king Shapur I during battle, becoming the first and only Roman emperor taken prisoner by an enemy. According to reports, Shapur used the captured emperor as a human footstool to mount his horse, forcing the 60-year-old Valerian to kneel whenever the Persian king wanted to ride. The stories get even worse, claiming Valerian was eventually skinned alive, and his stuffed skin was displayed in a Persian temple for centuries as a trophy. Some accounts say he was forced to drink molten gold before death. While the exact details might be Persian propaganda, the basic fact remains that a Roman emperor died in captivity as a slave to Rome's greatest enemy, Gallienus. Gallienus ruled for 15 years total from 253 to 268 AD, first alongside his father Valerian and then solo after his father's capture, presiding over the empire's worst fragmentation. The Roman Empire literally broke into three separate parts during his reign, with the Gallic Empire controlling Gaul, Britain, and Spain, the Palmyrene Empire holding Egypt, Syria, and Asia Minor, while Gallienus controlled only Italy and the Balkans at the lowest point. Numerous usurpers declared themselves emperor simultaneously across various provinces in what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. Despite reforming the military by creating a mobile cavalry force and ending Christian persecution, he couldn't stop the empire from falling apart. While besieging the usurper Aureolus at Milan in 268 AD, Gallienus was assassinated by his own officers, ending his failed attempt to hold Rome together. Honorius became Western Roman emperor at age 10 in 395 AD and ruled for 28 years while presiding over the terminal decline of the Western Empire. Real power stayed in the hands of his guardian Stilicho until Honorius had him executed, which proved to be a catastrophic mistake. On August 24th, 410 AD, Visigoths under Alaric sacked Rome for the first time in 800 years, while the emperor allegedly cared more about his pet chicken named Roma than the actual city. According to the historian Procopius, when told Roma has perished, Honorius was relieved to learn it was the city and not his chicken, though this story might be satirical. During his reign, Britain was effectively abandoned and large parts of Gaul and Spain were lost to barbarian groups. He died of edema at age 38 in 423 AD, having accomplished nothing except watching Rome collapse. Valentinian III became Western Emperor at age 6 in 425 AD, with his mother Galla Placidia ruling his regent, and his 30-year reign watched Rome's final disintegration. In September 454 AD, the paranoid emperor personally stabbed his best general Aetius to death, the same Aetius who had defeated Attila the Hun and was Rome's last competent military commander. 6 months later, in March 455 AD, supporters of Aetius murdered Valentinian in revenge, creating a power vacuum that led directly to catastrophe. The Vandals sailed from North Africa, which had been permanently lost during Valentinian's reign, and sacked Rome in June 455 AD, just 3 months after the emperor's death. His decision to murder Aetius ranks among the stupidest and most self-destructive acts by any Roman emperor, eliminating the one man who might have kept the Western Empire alive, Romulus Augustulus. Romulus Augustulus became the last Western Roman emperor in October 475 AD at age 12 to 16, placed on the throne by his father Orestes, who held the real power. The Eastern Empire never recognized him as legitimate, and his reign lasted only 10 months before Germanic chieftain Odoacer deposed him on September 4th, 476 AD. This date traditionally marks the fall of the Western Roman Empire, ending over 500 years of imperial rule in the West. The boy emperor's name was sadly ironic. Romulus after Rome's legendary founder Augustulus, meaning Little Augustus, a mocking nickname that highlighted how far the empire had fallen from the great Augustus, who started it all. Unlike most deposed emperors, Romulus was allowed to live, sent to a villa in Campania with a pension, and his fate after that remains unknown, though he may have survived to old age. Phocas was a centurion who murdered Emperor Maurice and his 5 sons in November 602 AD to seize the Byzantine throne, beginning an 8-year reign of terror in Constantinople. The new emperor tortured and executed nobles, officials, and anyone he suspected of disloyalty in his paranoid attempts to maintain power. During his reign, the Persian invasion escalated dramatically, leading to major territorial losses, including the critical cities of Damascus, Jerusalem, and Alexandria. The aristocracy and Constantinople's mob both turned against him as the empire burned. In October 610 AD, Heraclius sailed from Carthage with an army, and the people welcomed him as a liberator. Phocas was captured, tortured, tortured, mutilated, and finally beheaded, his head displayed publicly as a warning. His disastrous reign nearly destroyed the Byzantine Empire just when it needed strong leadership against Persian and later Arab invasions. Justinian II. Justinian II ruled the Byzantine Empire twice, from 685 to 695 AD, and again from 705 to 711 AD, earning the nickname the Slit-Nosed for obvious reasons. His first reign ended when nobles cut off his nose and tongue before exiling him, thinking that would be the end of him. They were very wrong. Justinian escaped exile with help from Khazar and Bulgarian allies, retook Constantinople in 705 AD wearing a golden prosthetic nose, and began his second reign as a revenge-fueled bloodbath. He massacred thousands in Constantinople, paraded enemies' heads on spikes through the streets, and allegedly killed over 100 nobles at a single banquet. His 6-year second reign was somehow even worse than his first. In December 711 AD, a revolution finally ended his madness permanently when he was beheaded, his head sent to a rival emperor as a trophy. Constantine XI Palaiologos. Constantine XI Palaiologos ruled as the last Byzantine emperor from January 1449 until May 1453, presiding over the final collapse of the 1,000-year empire that was Rome's continuation in the East. He wasn't evil like the others on this list, but faced an impossible situation when Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II brought 80,000 troops to besiege Constantinople while the emperor had only 7,000 defenders. The 53-day siege began April 6, 1453, with massive Ottoman cannons firing stones weighing over 5,000 pounds at the ancient walls. On May 29, 1453, the walls finally fell and Constantine died fighting in the streets, his body never identified among the thousands of dead. His last words were allegedly, "The city is fallen and I am still alive," before he charged into the final battle. His death ended the Roman Empire 1,480 years after Augustus founded it, closing one of history's longest chapters.